I have a story to tell you right off the top. Some of you have heard this, but don't spoil it for those who haven't. During COVID, the very first month, I was living on my own, and then I wasn't able to afford living on my own because I lost my job, and so I moved back to Los Angeles, and my buddy Mark needed a roommate, and he was like, "Dude, come move in with me. This is gonna be awesome. It's gonna be like we're in high school again or college again. Like, let's be roommates." And I was like, "Absolutely." So I move into this house, and this is a sketchy house, it's an apartment. The coolest thing about this thing was that it was by the beach. It was less than 200 feet from the ocean. In fact, I could wake up in the morning, pour a cup of coffee, and walk down to the beach and just be able to be there, which was so cool. But the place was terrible. When we moved in, our landlord said, "Hey, I'm not going to fix anything. Don't ever call me. I only take rent in cash, and that's it. But it's $1,600 for 2 rooms and 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and it's right by the ocean, so you make up your mind." And we said, "We'll take it." So we took this apartment, and as COVID really locked everybody down, we really didn't have anything to do except hang out in the apartment together until, and I'm sure this is a core memory for many of us dudes, the PS5 was released. Now, it was so hard to get. Do you guys remember how hard it was to get the PS5 during the pandemic? It was crazy. You went to every Target, you went to every Best Buy, you tried to order it online. It was on back order for like 6 months, and my roommate found a solution. The sketchiest dude on Craigslist had an ad that just said, "PS5 for sale." And my boy Mark was like, "I'm gonna buy that." And so we get in the car, he drives down there, and he tells me, we get there, and there's this big white van in the middle of a sketchy parking lot. And we walk up to the van, and the guy's like, and we're like, "Hey, are you the guy with the PS5? And he's got a thick accent. He's like, "Duh, I have PS5. And we were like, "Okay." And my roommate goes, "Just out of curiosity, where'd you get all these?" Because he opens the back of the van. There's 30 PS5s in the back of the van. And we were like, "Out of curiosity, how'd you get this?" And he goes, "Do you want the PS5 or do you want to know where it came from?" And we were like, "We will take the PS5. Thank you very much." So we go home, we plug in the PS5, we log in our PlayStation accounts. We're playing games. We got Red Dead Redemption 2 because we hadn't played it up until that point. We're playing Fortnite. We're playing Call of Duty. Everything. We're having a good time because it's COVID, so there's nothing else to do. And unlike many of you, I wasn't in school, so I could play 6-8 hour days of video games, unless my girlfriend at the time, Lauren, wanted to hang out, and then we were hanging out. But it was a good time to have a PS5. Why do I tell you this? Well, a month into us having a PS5, we were both playing this game called Ghost of Tsushima, and we were super stoked about this game. We were excited that it had come out. We were playing it all the time, and one night were playing it until about 2 a.m. And I get tired, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to bed. I'm out. I can't keep doing this." And my roommate's like, "I'm gonna keep playing." A few hours later, I'm asleep in my bed, and I hear a knock on the door. I'm like, "Dunk, dunk, dunk, dunk." And I'm like, "What's up, dude?" He wakes me up. He's like, Kevin. And I was like, and in my mind, I'm thinking he beat the game, he won the game or something. I don't care. And I woke up and I go, "I don't care if he won the game, bro. It's 4 a.m. Leave me alone." And he goes, "No, there's a fire outside." And so I was like, "What?" So I jump out of bed, throw some pants on, I run to the window, and sure enough, the entire right side of the apartment building is engulfed in flames. And then all of a sudden, we're like, "We got to get out of here." And so I'm throwing on clothes. Have any of you ever been asked the question, if you were in a house fire, what are the top 5 things you would grab? I actually know the top 5 things I would grab. I was like, "I need my laptop, I need my Bible, I need this picture that my girlfriend made for me, I need my passport, my ID," and we bolt out of there. And it was like a scene in a movie. People outside in their pajamas. This one lady, our neighbor, had 8 cats in travel containers, and she was looking fluffy, looking for the other one. It was insane. It was out of a movie. And then me and my roommate are like, "Should we be heroes? Should we stay and help to get the fire?" So we run up, we smash the glass on the emergency fire hose, and we try to turn it on. Nothing. Again, the landlord said he wasn't going to update anything, right? So the whole place is on fire, and my roommate goes, as we're walking out the door, "Wait, what about the PS5? And I was like, "Bro, should we bring it?" And we the fire is maybe from where I am to where Jacob is, and we are standing there going, should we bring the PS5? Like, do we take the PS5 with us? And we came to the conclusion, I went, bro, don't take it. I've got renter's insurance. It's covered. If it burns down, we get a new one, and we'll get a bigger TV. And he goes, okay, great. But we leave the house, and he locks the door, and he goes, I just want to make sure looters don't get our PS5. And I was like, I'm with you. We're on the same brain length. And so we both book it out. We're running past people who are also in their pajamas. Mind you, it's 4 a.m, right? Nobody knew this fire had started. Because the fire alert system in the building didn't work. So the only reason somebody knew that there was a fire was because some drunk dude came home from the bar at 3:30 and saw the fire building up in one of the apartments and started screaming, fire! My roommate would later tell me that he thought it was just some drunk dude messing around until he looked out the window and saw half of it was orange and was like, ooh, I gotta go wake up Calvin. But we run out, and then afterwards we're standing outside of our apartment, and we don't know if the apartment's gonna be there in the morning. The firefighters haven't shown up yet. We don't know what's going to happen. And I look at my roommate and I just go, so you want to go to Denny's or something? And he looks at me and goes, yeah, let's go to Denny's. And so at 5 a.m, we go to Denny's as our apartment is burning, and we're sitting there staring at each other, traumatized. And I FaceTimed Lauren, my now wife, at 6 a.m. She's like, why are you awake at 6 o'clock? You're never awake at 6 o'clock. It's the pandemic, and you're right. And I went, well, our house might have been burned down, and I don't know if anything's going to be there when we get back. Now, sure enough, when we get back, the fire had come one apartment away from ours burning down. And so everything in our house was fine. But 5 of my neighbors lost their apartments. It would later turn out that the reason why a fire had started was because 2 roommates in an apartment 4 apartments away from us had gotten in an argument that night. And out of a sense of retribution or out of a sense of revenge, his roommate barricaded the door of his room and then took a space heater and put it on the carpet and lit the apartment on fire in an attempt to kill him. Yeah. 5 people lost their homes. Now, thankfully, nobody died. The firefighters were able to get into the building. They drilled a hole in the roof and rappelled down and got him out before the fire could get him. But 5 people, 5 families lost their homes because one man decided to do something evil. And I almost lost my PS5. Now, why do I tell you this story? Well, we're in a new series called Asking for a Friend. And the idea of this series is that we're going to approach questions that we have pulled from you about some of the hardest questions in life. And today, the question that we're asking is, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to good people? The world is a really bad place. Outside of the funny parts of my story, again, 5 people almost did lose their homes that day. It is not normal for us to be able, and I'll just say this, it's not normal for you to be able to get on your phones, because we could all do this right now. We can get on our phones and find people getting shot, find people getting bombed, natural disasters. We can find murder victims, we can find murder victims on there. We can find all types of terrible things. And psychologically, the human brain was not designed to be able to take all that information in and process it. And not only is that something that we are constantly dealing with, but we are also becoming desensitized to violence and terrible things because it's so consistent in our life. Every single day, if you're on social media, some new disaster, some new murder, some new killing, some new war, some new natural disaster. In the last 2 weeks, 41 people have died from the ice storm that has been covering all of the Midwest and Texas and parts of the South, like the giant freeze that has happened recently. Just from the cold. Just from the cold. And that's something that I was able to look up and see, like the statistics of on TikTok this afternoon. It's crazy. It's not normal. The mind was not designed to be able to deal with all of that. It is not normal. And the tension that we have now as a culture, or as people who have access to all this information, is that we are constantly being desensitized to it and constantly being traumatized by it at the same time. Watching somebody die online and then having to the next day see, oh, there were 10 murders in some other country, and here's the footage right now for you. That's not normal. And so we have to ask ourselves, why do bad things happen? I think this is the question, one of the biggest questions that every Christian will ask themselves at some point in their life. Why do bad things happen to good people? But I want to say this, there's more to this question than just good people versus bad people, because here's the thing that I find interesting about the question of why do bad things happen to good people. What we're really asking is not why do bad things happen to good people. What we're really asking is, do some people deserve bad things and other people deserve good things? In other words, are some people better than other people? Are some people more of a good person than other people? Because if there are good people, then obviously they don't deserve bad things to happen to them. And if there are bad people, they absolutely deserve bad things happening to them. But I got an uncomfortable truth for you. No one is completely good. I'm not good. I sin every day. No one, you, your family, your friends, your pastors, your teachers, no one is completely good. Because if being good meant never messing up, if it meant never hurting somebody else's feelings, if it meant never making the wrong choice, none of us qualify as a good person. None of us qualify as a good person, because that would mean that we would have to be perfect. And I think I am a broken record because I say this all the time. We are not perfect people. And honestly, I don't want to be perfect. That's too much pressure. None of us are perfect. And so before we move on, some of you are probably thinking, okay, but like I'm not that bad of a person, right? Like I'm not a mass murderer. I'm not a war criminal. I'm not a terrorist. And I haven't done any of those type of terrible things. And I would say, you're right. You haven't done any of those things. Unless you have, and then that's scary and come, I don't know. I don't think any of us have. None of us have done any of those things. But Scripture is very clear that God doesn't measure sin. He doesn't measure bad things on a sliding scale. Some things are not as bad as, or not, some things are not worse than other things. It's all equal in God's eyes. It's not about comparison. It's about separation from God. All sin separates us from God. Romans 3:23 says this, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." Not some of us, all of us. Well, it means that which means that when we start the conversation by saying why bad things happen to good people, we have to kind of reshift our thinking to go, why do bad things happen? That's the real question. Why do bad things happen? Sin affects all of us equally. Some of us, it affects us in different ways, right? And some people are definitely like evil and worse off. Like if you think of any like war criminal like Mussolini or Hitler or anything like that, like those people are like definitively evil. But we all have sin in our life. Bad things happen in the world because there is sin in the world. That's it. That's the answer to the question at the very beginning. We'll get more into the complications of it, but that's the answer. Bad things happen because there is sin in the world. And when we talk about sin, when we talk about bad things happening, I like to put it into 4 categories that really kind of encapsulate all of like our feelings when it comes to this type of stuff. But before we get there, here's your first point, and that's this. Sin affects every part of us. Sin affects every part of us. Sin affects every part of us. There are many kinds of hurt in the world, like I said. So let me give you the 4 categories that we kind of put everything under. So the first one that we have is called emotional pain. Emotional pain. So emotional pain, this is the kind of stuff that's like grief or loss or anxiety or depression. It's like when you feel betrayed by somebody that you confided in, when you get rejected by someone, when you feel loneliness or when you feel alone, when you feel unseen or feel unwanted. This is the type of pain that doesn't leave a mark on you. on your body, I should say. It's not something that is always necessarily visible, but it is one of the most damaging for sure in our lives, because this is the stuff that will stick with you for the rest of your life in some cases. How many of you, like at one point in your life, don't raise your hands, just think for a moment, but how many of you in your life, like when you were in middle school, somebody did something that really hurt you, and to this day you still think about it? I see a couple of you nodding your heads. Emotional pain. It shapes how we see ourselves, how we see others, how we see God. The second one is this, physical pain. My athletes, y'all know what this is. It's tearing your ACL. It's getting hurt. It's chronic pain. It's illness. It's injury. But it's also violence. So wars, like sex trafficking, that type of stuff. Physical abuse. It's accidents, like if you've ever been hurt in an accident in a car or something like that. It's sickness, it's cancer, and above all, ultimately it's death. Right? It's painful. Physical pain reminds us of something that's really theological, actually, that we were not originally designed for pain. Pain was not part of God's plan for our lives, and so the fact that we have to experience it's a constant reminder that something is wrong in the world. The third one is this. It's kind of more cool, elemental pain. Elemental pain, what do I mean by that? I mean, this is like your earthquakes. Did anybody feel the earthquakes this morning? Dude, I was asleep and it woke me up and I was like, because there's a frame above my bed and I'm always scared it's gonna fall in my face. Yeah, you all felt the earthquakes, right? So we're talking about earthquakes. I'm thinking about like the LA fire from last year, the floods that happened in the South over the summer, right? Like I'm talking about storms that have consistently like destroyed the coastline and have decimated communities. I'm talking about droughts, famines, not having enough food because you can't grow anything, environmental destruction. Thinking about, like, I had a friend a few years ago who went hiking in Hawaii and got killed in a mudslide. She just went up the mountain one day and disappeared. It was terrible. An elemental pain. And the reason why I include this here is because creation itself is broken. God's creation, the thing that we exist in, also is affected by sin. It is also broken. The world, and there's many scriptures that we're going to get into in a little bit, but it says that the world groans under the weight of sin. And sometimes that brokenness manifests in storms and terrible tragedies. The fourth is probably the most impactful if you are pursuing God, and that is spiritual pain. Spiritual pain. This is often the deepest type of pain and the most confusing for us. And this would include stuff like being hurt by a church, being hurt by somebody in a church, religious trauma, abuse of power by somebody who said that they are a leader in the church or a leader of God, and they abuse that opportunity. They hurt you in some way. Or it's feeling abandoned or distant from God in a spiritual way, feeling like, man, Lord, I don't feel you in my life right now. Why is that? That's spiritual pain. It's the kind of pain that doesn't come out of nowhere. And it's interesting because scripture really is clear about how broken everything began in the world. And there's a necessity for us to understand why the world is so broken. In Romans chapter 5, verse 12, it says this: therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people. Death is not the natural state. You and I were not supposed to die. But because the world is broken, every single human, it's the equalizer of every human experience, that eventually we will all pass away. And this isn't just about, like, again, it's not about human behavior. If the sin affects the entire world. It says this later on in Romans 8, 20 through 22, or 21. For the creation was subjugated to frustration in hope that the day of creation itself will be liberated from the bondage of decay. Now, what does that mean? That means that creation itself is under the bondage of sin. It's decaying, it's falling apart, and it needs something to restore it back to what it initially was, what it was originally created, what we call in theology creational intention, originally created to be. Sin, I want to get this really clear through your head. Sin has fractured everything. It has fractured everything. The brokenness we see around the world, the injustices we see around the world are a result of the fall of sin entering into the world. And how sin entered the world is through disobedience. Right? Often when we talk about sin and like how sin came into the world, we have to talk about Adam and Eve, right? But there's a question that even myself, I have asked people before, and that's this. It's, why should the actions of people thousands of years ago affect me today? Why am I responsible for Adam and Eve's sin? Why do I have to suffer? Funny story. So a long time ago when I was working for summer camps, I worked at a camp that specialized in a lot of inner city kids going to camp for the first time. And there's a picture in my office, if you've ever come down there, of these two kids who I really invested in because their parents dropped them off every single week for 8 weeks of camp. And this one kid, he was like 7 years old. And one day I preach about Adam and Eve and like the fall in the garden. And afterwards he comes up to me and he goes, "Shoot, Calvin." And I was like, "What's up, dude?" And little 7-year-old. And these are like kids that they can cuss at like 3. So like they got a good, I'm going to use different words, but just imagine, be colorful with your minds. He goes, "Man, that was a good sermon." And I was like, "Thanks, bro. Please don't cuss." He's like, yeah. "You know what I'm going to do when I get to heaven?" "Yeah, bro." Like, and I'm thinking like, man, this kid's got it. Like he's listening to God. He understood the message. And I was like, "Yeah, dude, where are you going to go to heaven?" He goes, "I'm going to find Adam and kick his," like he's like, "I'm going to beat the bricks off Adam, bro, because he put us in this situation." And I was like, "Bro, I don't think you understand the message that I was given, but I appreciate you wanting to throw hands with the person that put us in this situation in the first place." But I want us to think about sin, right? So in the garden, Adam and Eve, they both sin, they both fall. We all know the story. If you haven't read it, it's in Genesis 3. You can go back and read it later for yourself. But in the story, they fall and sin comes into the world and creates hardship for all of us. But the question still stands, like, why do we all have to deal with it? Well, I want you to imagine it like this. Imagine you were born into a room. And in that room, there is somebody sitting in the corner who will smoke a cigarette every single moment of every single day of your life. And then by the time you're like 8 or 9, you start having breathing problems. And by the time you're 21, even if you don't smoke the cigarettes, you've now contracted like secondary cancer from inhaling so much smoke. That's kind of how original sin works. You're not the one smoking the cigarette. You're not the one who put yourself into the room that you were born into, but you have to deal with the fact that the smoke is still in the room and that it affects you. Now, this isn't a perfect analogy. I have many others. I use one with poop in a river, but that's for another day. It affects all of us. And you are still responsible for the actions you do in that room. Sin affects you even though you had no part in wanting to sin, but now because you are covered in that sin, you are responsible for your own actions. Your sin, you are responsible for your sin. So what this means is like sin, the reaction of sin is not us being punished for Adam and Eve's sin. What it means is that we are living with the consequences of a world that was broken by sin. Do you guys get the difference there? Yeah, I'm seeing some nodding heads. Awesome. We aren't guilty of Adam's sin, but we live in a world that has been shaped by it. So when we talk about bad things happening, sometimes when we don't understand that sin was not the responsibility of God, this question often gets brought up. Why can't God just fix it? Why can't God just fix it? Why can't you come down right now and just fix all the terrible things happening in the world? Here's your second point if you're following along. God doesn't make bad things happen, the broken world does. God doesn't make bad things happen, the broken world does. God does not cause evil and suffering. He does not cause sin and corruption. The world, again, is fractured. This original creation that God had, the pain and the loss and the tragedy that we experience is not God punishing us for sin. They are consequences of us living in a broken world that no longer operates the way God intended it to operate. I think back to moments in my life when I've been like, God, like, why is this happening? Why will you not let this thing be fixed? Will you not intercede? Will you not like stop me from experiencing these bad things? And part of the shift that we all have to take, my friends, part of the shift that we all have to take is realizing that God is not bringing evil into our lives. God is not the author of your suffering. That is never who he is. It's not even a part of the character of who God is. This is what scripture says about it in James chapter 1:13. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. God is not responsible for evil. God's holiness, this word that means to be set apart, to be greater than anything else. His holiness is not just something that he knows, it's something that he is. God defines things that are holy, defines things that are just, defines things that are gracious, defines things that are loving. And evil has no place in the heart of God. Which brings us to a really honest question that I hear from a lot of you when we talk about this topic. If God is loving, and if God truly cares about his people, if his nature is holiness, if his nature is loving, why won't he do something about it? Why won't he come down and like stop the accident from happening? Why won't he cure my grandmother of cancer? I was in Los Angeles this past weekend, and some of you know this, but my dad is really sick, and he's not going to be with us much longer. He's going to pass away pretty soon. And as I was driving back from Los Angeles on that really long 6-hour drive, I can't lie to you that I thought to myself several times as I was coming back, God, why won't you just heal this man? Why can't we just fix this? Why can't you come down and just rectify the situation, get rid of the pain? Why can't you just fix it? So if you've ever felt like, God, why can't you fix it? You're not alone. Every single one of us at some point has felt that emotion. But here's the truth. If God stepped in to every single thing that was bad that has ever happened, if he overrode or every sinful choice we made, if he stepped in before we were about to make a sinful choice, every harmful decision we had ever made, if he tried to step in and in every act of evil, then we would not have something that's incredibly important, free will. You would not have the ability to choose to do something bad, like be on your phone right now. God created us with the ability to choose, because love without choice is not love. It's just control. It's just control. God gave us freedom to choose what is good and what is glorifying and what brings life. But he also gave us the freedom, even though he doesn't want us to choose it, he gave us the freedom to choose things that are harmful, to choose things that are sinful, to choose things that are destruction. And again, he doesn't approve of it, but without the option to choose it, your decision to follow Christ literally means nothing because you had no other option. You had no other option. But in that choice of sin, God does not leave you. God doesn't leave you. He is present in the pain instead of preventing it. Oftentimes, I want you to hear that really closely. Oftentimes, God is present in our pain instead of preventing it. There's a huge difference there. When it comes, and if you want to talk about like elemental things, well, like why won't God stop tsunamis and stuff like that? All those types of disasters, these are also not part of God's cruelty. They are just constant reminders that this world is broken and fallen, and it's a consequence of sin impacting creation. The world was not meant to be this way. This verse in Romans 8:22 says this, for we know that all creation has been groaning as in pain of childbirth right up into the present time, right now. God is not absent in moments of pain, but he is not ever the cause of them either. But the best part of all of this is that God doesn't leave the situation there. He doesn't just say, like, there's pain, deal with it, I'm with you, but, like, you got to deal with it. God gives us answers and help. Here's your next point. God can redeem what the world breaks. God can redeem what the world breaks. God can take the worst moments of your life and meet you there. When at our lowest, when we feel like we are not loved or even have grace for ourselves, when we feel like there are no good options left in our life and everything feels heavy and overwhelming, God does not step away. Guess what? He draws near to you. He is never far away from you. There is a reason that so many people turn their attention towards God or towards, like, oh, I need to figure out my spirituality when they are going to a moment of struggle. How many of you have had a test that you were not prepared for, and right before that test you were like, Lord, let me do this well. Please, Jesus. Amen. I see some hands raised. Praise the Lord. Okay, that's okay. We're bargaining with God. We shouldn't do that, but it's all good. We have prayed to God, God, get me out of this broken situation. I didn't study, and even if I did, I didn't study enough. There's a reason why we go to God. Pain has a way of stripping away the illusion that we can do things ourselves. Pain has a way of suffering has a way of exposing the realities of a broken world that we don't have control of. And as much as suffering is evil and awful, and God does not desire us to suffer, He knows that it's going to happen. And He doesn't want to leave us alone in that. Here's what 2 Corinthians 12:9 says. It says, my grace is sufficient for you, and my power is made perfect in your weakness. One of my favorite things about my faith in God is that I don't have to be the strongest person in the room. Suffering often becomes a place where we finally stop pretending to be strong, my friends. And we start realizing we can't fix it ourselves. We cannot carry everything by ourselves. We need grace more than we need the... Am I back? Perfect. I was on my flow too. Dang it, man. One of the clearest examples that I see of this in Scripture is the story of Joseph. How many of you have heard Joseph's story before? Not Jesus's like stepdad, but like the Old Testament dude. Okay, a couple of you, great. Let me give you a quick summary because it's several chapters long, and if I read the whole thing, we'd be here all night. But Joseph is one of many sons, and his dad loves him the most. Like, you're not supposed to have favorites as a parent, but he definitely had a favorite, and he was the favorite child. And to be honest, Joseph's kind of proud of that. He's telling his brothers that he's having dreams about how they're all going to bow down to him and how he's going to be the best, and God's going to elevate him to a place of glory. And then his brothers, who are all older than him, and you got to understand, in Old Testament times, especially during the time of Joseph, for the youngest son to say that he was going to be above the oldest son was kind of like the biggest insult in the world. It was a huge insult. And so all of his brothers who are older than him go, you know what? We don't like Joseph. We want to kill him. So they throw him into a well, their own brother. They throw him into a hole. And the brothers are discussing, how do we kill him? And then one of the brothers is like, hey, let's not kill him. He's still our brother. Let's just sell him into slavery. And so they sell Joseph into slavery. Crazy. They send him into slavery, and he goes to Egypt. And for 7 years, Joseph is in Egypt. Now, Joseph didn't do anything to deserve almost being murdered, and then being thrown into a pit, and then being sold into slavery. And for the next 7 years, he's in Egypt, where, to be honest, at this point in time, they didn't treat slaves very well. Most of history, slaves haven't been treated well. So 7 years he's a slave. Did not deserve it. And then one day, he has become such a good servant to the master that he's elevated to a place of authority. And then the wife of his master sexually assaults him, essentially. And he's like, yo, get away from me. And then she turns it around and blames it on him. The husband, his master, believes him and throws him in jail for 7 years. Again, Joseph didn't do anything to deserve that. He was just being a man of God, and all of a sudden he's in prison for another 7 years. So if you're counting along, 7 years as a slave, 7 years in prison, 14 years away from his family, nothing but suffering, and yet he is still being giving God the glory. And as he's in prison, he interprets some visions, and eventually one day Pharaoh calls for him to his palace, and Pharaoh tells him this dream, and he interprets the dream well. And then at the end of that portion of the story, Joseph is elevated to the second most powerful person in the kingdom of Egypt. So he goes from being a slave to essentially a prince. And then years later, after he has been lord over Egypt, his brothers show up during a famine, which is basically another way of saying that there's no food anywhere and that his brothers needed food. And so he goes to these guys, his brothers show up, and there's a whole drama that unfolds. It's like they could make a TV show about it. It's so good. And at the end of it, the brothers finally realize, they didn't realize it was Joseph because they hadn't seen him in so many years, and he's wearing all the Egyptian makeup and all that stuff. And eventually Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, and his brothers are like, yo, our brother's going to kill us. He's going to kill us. He's going to imprison us because of what we did to him. And Joseph's response is insane. After all the suffering his brothers are responsible for putting him through, this is his response in Genesis 50. It says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." You see, without Joseph, the dreams of Pharaoh wouldn't have been interpreted, and they wouldn't have known that a famine was coming. And then hundreds of thousands of Egyptians and other countries surrounding Egypt would have died. The brokenness of Joseph's siblings and the willingness of Joseph to follow God ended up saving most of that portion of North Africa. God did not cause Joseph's suffering, but God used Joseph in incredible ways. Now, I have a more modern example for you. Well, for me, it's modern. For you, it's going to seem vintage and crazy, but that's fine. Have any of you ever watched The Breakfast Club? Does anybody know what that is? Oh, a couple of you. Great. You have taste. We are a people of culture. Good job. So The Breakfast Club is about a collection of teenagers that have Saturday detention, and they have to go to school on Saturday and write these essays. And each one of the individuals come from a different social group. One's a jock, one's a nerd, one's like a goth girl, one's like a burnout, like punk kid. And they all have to come together. And over the course of the movie, they're messing around a lot, and they're laughing around a lot, and they're pranking their teacher and stuff. And then they sit down after kind of breaking some social barriers, and they begin to have a really intense conversation about the expectations that have been placed on them, and how life has not gone well for anybody in this room. And then this scene takes place, so go ahead and take a look.
You don't understand. You're not friends with the same kind of people that Annie and I are friends with. You just don't understand the pressure that they can put on you.
I don't understand what? You think I don't understand pressure, Claire?
I edited out the cuss words. It's fine.
You know I'm here today. Do you? I'm here because Mr. Ryan found a gun in the locker.
Why'd you have a gun in your locker?
I tried. The trunk on, the light's supposed to go on. It didn't go on,
What's the gun for, Brian?
Just forget it.
You brought it up, man.
I can't have an F. I can't have it. I know my parents can't have it. Even if I ace the rest of the semester, I'm still only a B. Everything's ruined for me.
Brian.
Considering my options,
No, killing yourself is not an option.
Well, I didn't do it, did I? No, I don't think so.
It was a handgun?
That was a flare gun. Went off in my locker. It's not funny. Yes, it is.
It's a flare gun. If you don't know what that is, it's an emergency gun. It doesn't kill anything. It just shoots a little bit of sparks in the air. But that clip, I feel like it shows something really interesting. And even though none of the characters are Christians or anything like that, it shows us like how God works. At the beginning of this movie, Brian, the name of the character in green, Brian is like a nerd and he's like perfect, and everybody's like, dude, why are you in detention? Like, we don't understand. And over the course of the movie, he becomes comfortable enough with his friends or with these new people who he's now slowly to consider friends, to tell them that he wanted to take his life because he was afraid of getting an F in a class. And this kid, Brian, is in real pain and he is in real shame. But because he is forced into a space of detention where he has to meet people that he would never have met before otherwise or ever spoken to otherwise, he is now known, he is listened to, and he is accepted. And by the end of the movie, he leaves not being defined by whether or not he gets an F in a test, but by knowing that he now has people who know him and love him. Now, this is a great example of grace and how God works in pain, because the F is still there. His parents are still going to find out that he has an F in class. It's still going to affect his grade. He's still going to end up graduating that class with a B. But that pain no longer defines him. He no longer wants to take his life. He no longer wants to hurt himself because he has found purpose in something else, being known and loved by this new group of friends. That's what God often does for us in suffering. He doesn't just remove the pain immediately, but he meets us in it. He brings connection and healing and hope in a place that we would never expect to experience. But places like that, like, it changes us. When we go through painful things, it changes us. God can take even your darkest moment and turn it into a place where faith grows, where trust deepens with your relationship with God, and where grace becomes the most real it ever has felt. Now, as we close out, here's your last point. Our faith is made stronger in struggle. Our faith is made stronger in struggle. It's really easy for us to believe that God has everything together for us, or that he's with us when everything is in our life is going easy. It's a much different situation to believe that God has our best interests when stuff is going really hard. And that's where our faith really grows, when it's being pushed and we have to lean on our relationship with God in a different and new way when it's not comfortable. And James 1:2-4 says this: "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, wherever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." And then later in verse 12 it says, "Blessed is the one who perseveres under trials, because having understood the test, the person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." God does not want us to go through trials, my friends. He doesn't want us to have to experience how fallen the world is, how broken and sinful the world is. But he will be there with you through every situation that you go through in your life. So as we leave, I don't want to leave on such a heavy note. So let me give you let me give us, like, what does this look like for us, right? Because when bad things happen, how do we handle that now? How do we handle bad things? How do we handle bad things? Because bad things are going to be happening. Even, like, we now know that God will be present with us in it, so how do we handle it? There's a couple of ways that Scripture invites us to respond differently. Instead of blaming God, we say, "God, how can you be there with me?" The Psalms are filled with people suffering and hurting and going to God with their grief and their anger and their complaints. I want to challenge you this. You can be angry at God. That's not a sin. You can be frustrated with God. That's not a sin. You can feel like you don't want to talk to God. That's not a sin. The Psalms, the Bible is filled with people who brought their hurts and anger and frustration and pain to the Lord, and God can take it. So what does this look like for us as we leave? So let me give you 4 reasons real quick, and then we're going to head out to small groups. So the first one is this. I want you to be honest with God. I want you to be honest with God. When you're hurting, you don't need to clean yourself up before you go talk to God. I want you to say stuff like, I don't agree with you, God. I'm angry with you, God. I feel abandoned by you, God. I don't know where you're going with this, God. I want you to be honest with God, because nothing you can say is something God hasn't heard 1,000,000 times. Those aren't signs of weak faith either. I want to be clear about that. They are signs of a real faith. If you're doing work with God, if you're challenging the Lord in a godly way, that's good. That's faith. You're practicing it. The second one is this: don't isolate yourself, invite people in. Pain often convinces us that we got to struggle alone or in silence and carry everything on ourselves, but healing almost never comes from just yourself. I don't know many people who disappeared and went to go figure their life out and didn't have anybody speak into their life in order to get out of a hard situation. I want you to and if it's not a parent, maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's I hope it's a parent, but if it's not, maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's a small group leader. Maybe it's another leader in your life, a teacher, a coach. You weren't designed to carry suffering by yourself. God often brings healing through community. So that's your second one. Your third one is this: don't try to solve everything at once. Don't try to solve everything at once. Life is filled with problems. It's filled with sin and suffering and hardship and bad things. And if you approach it going, I need to fix everything at once before I can feel like I can get right with God, you're setting yourself up for failure. Take one small faithful step. What do I mean by that? Open your Bible. Pray. Say, hey, God, I'm frustrated. Talk to a mentor. Talk to a small group leader. You're more than welcome to talk to me if you want. Find that one small step that you can do. And here's your last one. Trust that God is still working even when you can't see it. So much of our life is God working in our suffering and in our pain and our hardship, and us not being able to see it until we get out of it. Just because God is quiet does not mean God is absent. Just because you don't see change doesn't mean that change isn't coming in your life. God works often very slowly and deeply in our mind, in our hearts and in our minds in unseen ways. What feels like wasted pain to us is often the very place where God is going to meet you in a new, profound way that you haven't been met before. And so here's my closing thought for you as we go out to small groups. If you're hurting right now, I want you to really hear me when I say this. God is not disappointed in you. If you're suffering right now, God is not distant from you. And your pain is not meaningless to God. I want you to bring your questions to the Lord. I want you to bring your anger and your frustration and your grief and your confusion. I want you to bring it all to God because He can take it. Because faith doesn't begin with us having all the answers. It doesn't begin with us having all the peace. It begins when we show up. And when you do that, God promises you that He will meet you there.